What happened that morning on the 17th of March 2023 changed absolutely everything I believed about Jesus Christ, about Satan, about good and evil, about heaven and hell, and especially about the exact date on which all this will end and begin again, in a way that you never imagined, because what I saw, what I heard, and especially what that figure showed me when he emerged from the fog, saying that Jesus was coming, was not just information. It was an experience so profound, so terrifying, so transformative, that to this day, 3 years later, I still wake up at 3 in the morning sweating with my heart racing, reliving every second of that impossible encounter. And if you are ready to discover truths that have been distorted for 2,000 years, truths that the church has hidden truths about who Satan really is and what he has to do with the imminent return of Jesus, then subscribe to this channel now and turn on the notification bell, because what you will hear in the next 60 minutes could shake the foundations of everything you have been taught, and maybe you will never be able to see the world the same way. My name is Daniel Oliveira Campos, and I was 51 years old when everything happened. A widower for 1 year and 4 months since Laura died in a car accident that left me completely devastated, because we weren't just husband and wife for 27 years, we were best friends, and when she left, she took with her any meaning my life still had. I worked as a nurse in a public hospital in a city in the interior of Minas Gerais. Endless night shifts taking care of terminally ill patients, people dying alone in cold corridors, and every night I saw my own reflection in those hopeless eyes, because inside, I was also slowly dying. My routine was mechanical and empty. I woke up at 5 o'clock in the afternoon after sleeping badly with recurring nightmares about Laura calling me from the other side of an abyss that I couldn't cross. I drank cold coffee alone in the kitchen that still smelled like her, looking at the empty chair where she used to sit. I drove to the hospital on autopilot, passing through the same traffic lights along the same streets, through the same lives that continued while mine had completely stopped. At work I functioned, applied medications, changed bandages, held the hands of dying people, and said that everything would be fine, even though I knew it was a lie, even though I didn't believe in anything else. My colleagues looked at me with pity and whispered behind my back, "Poor Daniel, he never recovered. He is letting himself die too," and maybe they were right, because I had stopped eating properly. I had lost 14 kilos. My uniform was too loose on the body that was wasting away along with my will to live. I returned home at 7 o'clock in the morning with the rising sun burning my tired eyes. I entered that empty house where every object, every photograph, every memory was a stab in the chest. I tried to sleep, but the silence was deafening. The emptiness was palpable. Her absence occupied all the space and suffocated me. I started drinking. Not much at first, just a beer to relax, then 2, then half a bottle of whiskey, until I fell unconscious, because it was the only way not to feel, the only way not to think, the only way not to remember that I was completely alone in this cruel and indifferent world. I had been raised in an evangelical church, baptized at the age of 12. I attended services throughout my adolescence. I sang in the choir. I met Laura in the church. We got married in a beautiful ceremony with a pastor blessing our union, and I really believed in God, in Jesus, in salvation and eternal life. But when Laura died, when I prayed for 40 days straight, begging for a miracle, begging God to save her, and he did absolutely nothing, all that faith collapsed like a sandcastle hit by a tsunami. I stopped going to church. I stopped praying. I stopped reading the Bible, which was gathering dust on the bedside table. When brothers from the congregation called me, I hung up when they came to visit me. I pretended not to be at home, because I didn't want to hear that it was God's will, that Laura was in a better place, that I should accept the divine plan. Because what kind of God violently snatches a 46-year-old woman, full of life, full of love, full of plans from the side of her husband, who loved her more than anything? On the night of March 16, 2023, my shift ended at 6 o'clock in the morning. It had been an especially difficult night, with 3 patients passing away. One of them, an 82-year-old lady who begged not to die alone. So I held her hand until her last breath, and when she left, I felt something break inside me. Definitely something that couldn't be fixed. I left the hospital with the sky still dark and heavy clouds foreshadowing a storm. I entered the car, but I couldn't drive it. I sat there in the empty parking lot, with my hands shaking on the steering wheel, thinking that I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't live in that internal hell that I carried everywhere. So I did something I had never done, I started the car, and instead of going home, I drove out of the city with no specific destination, just running away from the empty house, running away from the memories, running away from myself. The rain started slowly, just a few drops on the windshield, then turned into a violent storm with thunder tearing through the sky and lightning lighting up the deserted road. I drove for approximately an hour on dusty dirt roads, passing abandoned farms and empty fields until I no longer knew where I was, and I didn't care. I stopped the car in an open field surrounded by dense forest at 7:43 in the morning, with the storm reaching its peak, rain hitting the roof of the car furiously as if the sky was collapsing. I turned off the engine and just sat there in the dark, with only the deafening sound of rain and thunder, and for the first time in a year and 4 months I really considered ending it all. Simply ending that pain that wouldn't go away with that emptiness that only grew with that life that wouldn't go away. It was more life, but just mechanical and painful existence. I closed my eyes, and for the first time since I stopped praying, I whispered into the void, God, if you exist, if you are really there, give me a sign, anything, because I can't take it anymore. I just can't take it. But I didn't expect an answer because I no longer believed that there was anyone listening, that there was anyone who cared. And then the rain stopped. It didn't gradually ease. It simply stopped suddenly, as if someone had turned off a celestial tap, and the silence that followed was absolute, almost supernaturally oppressive. I opened my eyes, and that's when I saw it. A dense fog starting to form out of nowhere, rising from the ground, as if the earth was breathing a thick grey mist that covered the entire field in a matter of seconds, reducing visibility to less than 3 meters. My heart started to beat faster, a primal instinct telling me that something was wrong, that I should start the car and get out of there immediately. But I was paralyzed, unable to move, unable to take my eyes off the fog that was now swirling around the car in patterns that were unnatural. The temperature dropped drastically. I could feel my breath condensing on the cold air that came in through the cracks in the windows, and then I saw a figure, just a dark outline in the middle of the fog. At first I thought I was seeing things that were extreme tiredness or the beginning of a nervous breakdown, but the figure started to become clearer and more defined, walking slowly towards the car. It was a man, or something with a human shape, tall, approximately 6 feet tall, wearing what looked like a perfectly tailored dark suit, completely incongruous in that isolated place at that time of the morning. The face was still hidden by the fog, but I could feel it watching me. I could feel the weight of that gaze passing through glass and metal and skin, reaching straight into my soul. Every cell in my body screamed for me to get out of there, to escape, but I was frozen, trapped not by physical fear, but by something deeper, something primal, as if every survival instinct had been turned off, and I was simply waiting for whatever was going to happen. The figure stopped approximately 2 meters from the car, and the fog around it began to dissipate, revealing first the perfectly polished black shoes, then the impeccable suit pants, then the torso, then finally the face. And when I saw that face, my blood froze, because it was disturbingly beautiful, with perfect features, almost too symmetrical skin, pale as marble eyes, that even in the gloom of the cloudy morning glowed with unnatural intensity, not red like paintings of the devil depict, but golden like molten gold, piercing hypnotic eyes that seemed to see through all the masks and defenses straight to the most hidden core of who I was. He smiled, and it wasn't a cruel or threatening smile. It was an almost gentle, almost compassionate smile. And then he spoke, and his voice didn't come from outside. It came from inside my own head, resonating directly in my brain. Daniel Oliveira Campos, 51 years old, nurse, widowed for 1 year and 4 months, considering ending his life at this very moment. My mouth went dry. I tried to speak, but no sound came out. I could only nod slightly in silent confirmation. He continued, I know exactly who you are. I know the pain you carry. I know the emptiness that corrodes. I know the anger you feel towards God that you blame for Laura's death. I know every dark thought, every moment of despair, every night you cried alone, wishing it were you in her place. As tears began to stream down my face involuntarily, not from fear, but from something inexplicable of being completely seen, completely known by that impossible presence, I managed to whisper, Who are you, in a hoarse, broken voice. He tilted his head slightly still, smiling, and replied, You know who I am. Daniel, deep in your heart, you already know. And yes, I felt absolute panic, because I knew, with every fiber of my being, even though my rational mind screamed, that it was impossible, that it was crazy. You are what I tried to say, but the word didn't come out, so he completed it for me. Yes, I am the one you call Satan, the devil, the adversary, the deceiver. So many names, so many distortions, but today I came to speak the truth, and I specifically came to talk to you at this moment because you are ready to listen, because your pain has opened cracks in your certainties, and through these cracks, the truth can finally enter. My first instinct was absolute panic. Childhood memories of preaching about the devil, about possession, about eternal damnation flooded my mind. But then I looked back into those golden eyes and I saw no malice. I saw no cruelty. I saw something that shocked me to my core. I saw compassion. I saw understanding. I saw something that looked strangely like love, and that confused me more than anything. Because how could the devil have eyes like that? He must have sensed my confusion because he continued, "Everything you were taught about me is a distortion. Daniel, half-truth, half-lie built over centuries to maintain control, to maintain fear. Because while humanity fears external hell, it does not realize that it lives in the internal hell that it creates every moment through every low-frequency thought. I am not your enemy, never have been. In fact, I am a teacher, the tester, the one who presents choices, because without choice there is no free will, and without free will there is no evolution." I was finally able to form a complete sentence. "If you are the devil, why don't I feel afraid because I don't feel like you want to hurt me?" And he replied, "Because I don't want to hurt you." Daniel, that was never my role. My role is to show duality, to show the options for each soul to consciously choose, and you, Daniel, is at a critical crossroads considering choosing death when in fact he is about to witness something that very few humans have witnessed. I wiped away the tears trying to process the impossible, trying to reconcile everything I learned in church with that strangely non-threatening presence in front of me. "What do you want from me?" I asked with a still trembling voice. He took a step closer now, just 1.5 meters from the car, and replied, "I don't want anything from you, Daniel. I didn't come to make a pact. I didn't come to ask for your soul. This is another terrible distortion. I came to give information. I came to reveal truths that you always intuited but were taught to suppress. And mainly I came to tell you something about Jesus Christ, something that will happen very soon, something that will change absolutely everything on this planet." My heart accelerated even more, because the mention of Jesus coming from the lips of the supposed Satan was shocking. It was heretical. It was impossible. "Jesus, what do you have to do with Jesus?" My voice came out louder, more challenging. He smiled again and said, "Everything, Daniel, I have everything to do with Jesus, because contrary to what they preach, we are not mortal enemies in an eternal cosmic war. We are necessary polarities, light and shadow, day and night, both essential for the human experience, both serving the same greater purpose, which is the evolution of consciousness. Jesus came to teach about light, about love, about divine potential within, and I exist to test that light, to strengthen through challenges, to present the opposite. So that choice is possible, you understand." No, I didn't understand anything. I was completely lost. Every word he said contradicted decades of religious teachings, but something inside me, something deep and forgotten, whispered that there was truth in those words, truth that I always felt, but never had the courage to admit. So he continued, and his next sentence changed absolutely everything. "He is coming. Daniel, Jesus is returning, not in the way you were taught, not by physically descending from the clouds, but in a much deeper way, much more transformative. And when that happens, when the specific date arrives, the entire belief system, all the control, all the fear that was built in his name, it will fall apart, because the truth will be undeniable." I tried to ask for the date, but my voice failed again. He nodded. "Yes, there is a specific date, a precise time window based on planetary alignments in collective frequencies in number of awakened souls. And I came to tell you that date. But first, I need to prepare you. I need you to understand the full context, because otherwise you won't believe it. And this information needs to spread through people like you, people who have suffered, who have questioned that they are ready for the truth without filters." I breathed deep down, trying to calm my heart that was beating uncontrollably. Why did I choose me to tell this? I questioned, genuinely confused. His answer was simple and devastating. "Because you have nothing left to lose, Daniel. Because you have already hit rock bottom, you have already lost everything you loved. You have already questioned. God has already considered death. And exactly in this state of complete detachment, of complete vulnerability, what truth can enter, because you no longer have defenses, you no longer have masks, you no longer have reasons to pretend or deny, and your pain, Daniel, your Deep pain qualifies you because only those who have descended into hell internal can truly understand the message I need to convey. He was right. I knew he was right. And that realization broke something inside me, broke last resistance. And I heard myself saying, tell me, then tell me everything. Because if I'm going to go crazy, if I'm going to be possessed, if I'm going to be condemned, so be it. But I need to know, I need to understand, I need to find some meaning in this meaningless life. Satan. And it was so surreal to think of that name connected to that being who showed more compassion than any pastor I've ever met, came even closer. He put his hand on the hood of the car, and I felt heat emanating from that hand. Heat that went through metal and reached me, not the heat of hellfire, but comforting heat, like a hug that I hadn't received in over a year. Great Daniel, now relax, breathe deeply, because I'm going to open your perception. I'm going to temporarily raise your frequency so you can process the information I'm going to give you, and then you'll decide what to do with that knowledge. I don't know how to explain what happened in the next few seconds. I felt something like a wave going through my body, starting at the base of the spine, going up the spine, passing through each vertebra, each organ, each cell, until it exploded at the top of my head. And suddenly, everything seemed clearer, more vivid. The colors were more intense. The sounds were clearer. I could feel the humidity in the air. I could feel the earth under the car. I could feel my own heart-pumping blood. I could feel something bigger, something infinite, something connected to absolutely everything that exists. Better, he asked, and I nodded, unable to form words, still processing the intensity of that new perception. Well, now I'm going to start with the foundations of what Jesus really was and what he really came here to do, because distortion starts right there. Jesus Christ, and he pronounced this name with genuine reverence and deep respect, was and still is a being of extremely high consciousness, what you would call ascended or evolved. He came from a much higher dimension than this. He incarnated in a human body through a genetically prepared lineage. Mary was not an ordinary virgin. She carried special DNA preserved through generations to be able to sustain Christic frequency in physical form. This was pure heresy. I should have been shocked, offended, but instead I was fascinated, completely engrossed in every word. He continued, Jesus did not come to create religion. This needs to be absolutely clear. Religion, especially organized. Christianity was later construction, done by men with power agendas. Paul specifically distorted many original teachings, replacing personal empowerment with institutional dependence, replacing direct access to the divine with mandatory church intermediation, replacing message that all are children of God with message that only through Jesus is salvation. Do you see the difference? I saw it for the first time. I was seeing it clearly, and it hurt. It hurt to realize how many layers of conditioning needed to be peeled away. But then, what was the real message? I asked, leaning forward, leaning my forehead against the steering wheel, trying to take it all in. Satan responded patiently. The real message was, and still is, you are God. You are divine. You are the creator of your reality. The kingdom of God is not in the outer sky. It is within you. Every thought you think, every emotion you feel, every belief you hold, creates your experience of reality, moment by moment. This is universal law, law of manifestation, law of attraction. Call it what you want. Jesus mastered this law completely, and that's why he performed what you call miracles. But they weren't miracles. They were conscious applications of universal principles. He healed because he knew that illness is just a low frequency manifested in the physical body, and he could instantly raise the person's frequency through touch, through words, through unshakable certainty in healing. He multiplied bread because he understood that matter is condensed energy, and energy can be manipulated by sufficiently focused consciousness. He walked on water because he transcended physical limitations through such a high vibrational frequency that he was no longer completely subject to the laws of three-dimensional physics. You understand? I was understanding, and it was terrifying and liberating at the same time. Please continue, I begged. He continued. Jesus tried to teach humanity this. He tried to show that everyone can do what he did. That's why he said you will do even greater things than these. That's why he said the kingdom is within you. That's why he said when 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there I am in their midst, because he knew that when consciousnesses align at the same high frequency, the power of manifestation multiplies exponentially. But this message was dangerous for power. Structures of the time Rome needed control. Priests needed control. So after his death, especially after the Council of Nicaea in the year 325 after Christ, it was changed. A lot was removed. Entire gospels were banned, those that showed Jesus teaching specific manifestation techniques, those that showed Mary Magdalene as a disciple, the same as those that showed reincarnation as a reality. Everything removed, everything hidden, everything distorted to create a religion of control instead of a system of empowerment. Tears flowed freely now, not from sadness, but from anger, from a lifetime of believing in a diluted version of a version that made me small, that made me dependent, that made me powerless. They lied, I whispered. They lied to all of us. Not completely. Satan gently corrected. They kept the core of truth. Jesus really existed. He really was crucified. He really rose because he dominated the body to the point that he could rebuild it on a molecular level. He really loved unconditionally. All of this is true. But layers of interpretation, layers of dogma, layers of control were added, and central message was lost. Message that you don't need an external savior, because internal Christ is already in you. Just sleeping, waiting to be activated. How I activated without thinking, question coming out automatically. For the first time, Satan smiled widely, almost with joy. Finally, the right question. Daniel, the question every human being should ask and answer is both simple and profound. You activate inner Christ through frequency, through conscious choice, moment by moment to live in love, instead of fear in gratitude, instead of complaint in compassion, instead of judgment in certainty, instead of doubt. Each time you choose high-frequency thinking, each time you choose high emotion, you activate a little more until you reach critical mass, and then transformation happens, enlightenment happens, ascension happens. You become like Jesus, not identical but similar in consciousness, in power, in frequency. It sounded too good to be true. It sounded like exactly the kind of deception the devil would do. But those golden eyes weren't lying. I could feel the truth resonating in every cell of my body. And heaven and hell, I asked, are they real or also distortion? Excellent question, he answered. They are real, but not as you were taught. They are not physical places you go to after death. They are vibrational states that you experience now in this life. Hell is living on a low frequency, constantly in fear, in guilt, in hate, in resentment, in victimhood. This creates hellish experience. Body, you get sick, relationships are toxic, money doesn't flow, opportunities don't appear. You live in constant suffering. This is hell, and you create it, Daniel. You create it through thought patterns, through limiting beliefs, through unconscious emotional choices. Heaven is opposite, is living in high frequency, in love, in gratitude, in peace, in joy, in certainty. This creates heavenly experience. Health flows, relationships are harmonious, abundance appears, synchronicities happen, life flows with ease. This is heaven, and again you create. There is no judgmental God up there deciding who goes where. You choose your heaven or hell every second through what you think and feel and believe, and when you die, when you transition, you simply continue on the frequency that was dominant during life. If you lived in inner hell, you keep experiencing it until you learn. If you lived in inner heaven, you keep evolving into dimensions. Even higher is a perfectly fair, perfectly logical system based on absolute free will. My mind was exploding connections, forming perceptions, expanding, and suddenly I understood everything. I understood why my life had become hell after Laura's death, because I delved into guilt, into anger, into resentment, into self-pity, and these frequencies created more pain, more isolation, more suffering. Vicious cycle fed back. I created my own hell, I whispered in shock. Yes, Satan confirmed softly. You created through understandable emotional choices given circumstance, but still, choices and good news. Wonderful, liberating news is that if you created, you can uncreate. You can choose differently. You can change frequency. You can leave hell and enter heaven, not after death, but now, starting at this very moment. How desperate I was now, not to die, but to actually live. Teach me how, please. He nodded affirmatively. I'll give you and teach specific techniques. But first, I need to tell you about the return of Jesus, because this is directly connected. Because when he returns, when critical mass of humans awaken, simultaneously, everything will become easier. Morphogenetic field will change, planetary frequency will elevate, and those who are already practicing will be prepared to serve as anchors of light, to help others who will be confused and scared. When I breathed, barely able to form a word, He looked directly into my eyes with an intensity that paralyzed. Between the years 2028 and 2033, specifically during the spring equinox in the Northern Hemisphere, March 2030, when specific planetary alignment creates a unique energetic window, when Jupiter and Saturn align with the Pleiades, when solar frequencies reach a specific peak, at that moment, Jesus will return, but not physically, not descending from a cloud. Understand? I didn't understand. I shook my head in confusion. He explained, the return of Jesus is the awakening of mass Christ consciousness. It is the simultaneous activation of thousands and then millions of humans remembering who they really are, remembering their internal divine power. Jesus does not need to return in a physical body because he never left. He is always here in a higher dimension, observing, guiding, and when the date arrives, when the frequencies are correct, he will do what you would call a massive energetic transmission, a wave of Christic frequency that will sweep the planet, and everyone who is minimally open, everyone who has done preliminary internal work will be activated instantly. It will be like waking up from a deep sleep and suddenly remembering everything. And the others, those who are not ready, I asked. For these, it will be more difficult. Satan admitted, there will be a period of chaos of confusion because old systems will collapse. Lies will be exposed, control structures will collapse. Many will panic, many will resist, many will try to hold on to the old, but eventually they too will awaken. Perhaps it will take more time, perhaps more incarnations, but everyone will eventually get there, because this is the natural trajectory of conscientious evolution. I sat in silence for an indefinite period of time, processing magnitude of what was being revealed. 2030, just 7 years in the future or less, depending on when exactly, and finally asked, why are you telling me this? Why reveal this now? Because he replied, you are at a critical point. Humanity is at crossroads, can choose path of self-destruction, war, environmental collapse, extinction, or can choose path of evolution, awakening transformation, and for the second path to be chosen, people need to know, they need to have hope. They need to understand that change is not only possible, but is imminent. So I and others like me are showing up to selected individuals around the planet, planting seeds of truth. Others like you, I repeated, there are more like you, more beings doing this. He smiled. There are hierarchies, Daniel, levels of consciousness. Some call angels, archangels, ascended masters, all working together, despite different labels, despite apparent opposition in the end. They all serve the same purpose, which is evolution. And he bowed his head slightly. And I, who am called Satan's adversary, I simply play the role of presenting choice of testing to strengthen through challenge. Without me, without opposite polarity, there would be no growth, there would be no free will, you understand now. I finally understood that good and evil were not opposing teams at war, but necessary polarities, cosmic dance creating context for choice, for evolution, for experience. You are not my enemy. I murmured more to myself than to him. I never was, he replied. I was always a mirror showing shadows that need to be integrated. I was always a teacher disguised as a tempter. I was always part of the greater plan, just as Jesus is a part, just as you are a part. Everyone playing roles, everyone learning, everyone evolving together. And in that moment, sitting there in that car in an isolated field covered in supernatural fog, talking to a being that should terrify me but instead freed me, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. I felt peace, not superficial peace, but deep, visceral peace, of finally understanding, of finally seeing the bigger picture, of finally knowing that suffering had purpose, that pain had meaning, that nothing was ever an accident. Then something happened that I didn't expect. Satan said, now Daniel, I'm going to give you a gift. I'm going to show you something that only the purest humans have seen. I'm going to take you to meet Jesus directly, not in a vision, not in a dream, but in real experience. Because you need absolute certainty, you need to know without a shadow of a doubt, so that you can carry this truth for the rest of your days. And you who are listening to this now understand that you are not listening by chance. At this very moment, in which these words reach you, there is deep reason. There is divine synchronicity operating. And I need to know, tell me in the comments where you are listening to us, your city, your country, because it is incredible how this message crosses oceans, crosses continents, reaching souls in Sao Paulo, in Lisbon, in Luanda, in Vancouver, in Tokyo, in every corner of this planet, each person, at the exact moment, their soul, was ready to receive. So right below, share your location, because you are part of this network of light that is forming. My heart started beating so fast that I thought it was going to explode. Finding Jesus. How is it possible, I managed to ask between irregular breaths. Satan reached out his hand towards the car window. Will it be possible if you trust, if you surrender, if you allow me to raise your frequency, even higher, much higher to the level where he exists, where he has always observed humanity, from where he prepared for return? It will be intense. It will change you forever. It will carry the weight of this knowledge throughout your life. You still want it questioned with absolute seriousness, without pressure, just offering. Free choice. I thought of Laura. I thought of all the years of pain. I thought of God, that I questioned, that I blamed, that I abandoned. I thought of all the doubts, all the fears every night crying alone. And then I thought that if there was even a slight chance, then a 1% chance that this was real, that I could actually see Jesus. I had to try, I had to know. Yes, I whispered then louder. Yes, show me, I need to see, I need to know. He nodded and instructed. Then close your eyes. Take 3 deep breaths with each inhalation. Imagine golden light entering the top of your head. With each exhale, release all fear, all doubt, all resistance can begin. I closed my eyes, hands pressing the steering wheel, trying to anchor myself in physical reality before diving into the impossible. I took a deep breath once, feeling cold air entering my nostrils, filling my lungs. A second time, feeling my body begin to vibrate gently. A third time, and it was as if something in me opened like a portal inside my chest, opening wide. I felt Satan's hand, not physically but energetically, touching my third eye, the center of my forehead, and heat exploded from that point. Heat that quickly turned into a fire, running through every nerve, every blood vessel, every cell in my body. I was burning, but not from pain, was burning with pure energy of pure light, and then the world disappeared. Not gradually, but instantly. 1 second, I was in the car. The next, I was somewhere completely different, floating. I no longer had a body, or at least, I didn't feel a physical body. I was pure consciousness, pure perception, watching around, and what I saw took away any remaining breath. I was in space that was not infinite space in all directions, but not empty, filled with golden light, sparkling, vibrant, living light that seemed to have consciousness of its own, that enveloped me, caressed me, knew me. And in the center of this immensity of light there was figure. His back was initially at a distance impossible to determine, because there were no references, no horizon, no floor, no ceiling, just light, and that figure. But even with his back, even without seeing a face, I knew with every particle of my being that it was him who was Jesus. And something in me completely broke. Every armor, every defense, every pretension crumbled, and I began to cry tears that were not physical because I had no physical body. But I was crying anyway, with the deep relief of recognition of returning home after being lost for so long. He began to turn slowly, and time seemed to slow down each fraction of a second, stretching infinitely. And when I finally saw his face, everything I learned, everything I was taught in Sunday school, every image of white, blonde, European Jesus I saw in churches, it all exploded, because the man before me was different, completely different, and infinitely more real, more human, more divine simultaneously. His skin was dark olive brown, burnt by the relentless sun of the Judean desert, textured skin with small imperfections marked by a life lived to the full. Hair was dark brown, almost black, wavy, falling to just below his shoulders, framed by a beard, also dark, trimmed, but not perfectly groomed. They contained entire universe's eyes that saw everything, absolutely everything, every mistake, every failure, every moment of weakness, every hidden shadow, and yet they loved unconditionally, without reservation, without judgment, just pure, infinite, unconditional love that doesn't charge, that doesn't demand, that simply loves because it's their essential nature. He was approximately 1 meter and 70 tall, a common height for a Semitic man of that time. No physical grandeur, but presence. Oh, the presence was overwhelming, as if he occupied not just space around, but every dimension, every universe, every existence. His simple presence was so full, so complete, that there seemed to be no space for anything else. He was wearing a simple faded beige tunic, but the tunic seemed to emit its own subtle light. It was not ordinary fabric. It was something else that vibrated at a visual frequency that physical eyes would not capture, but in that expanded state of consciousness I saw clearly. And then he moved and walked towards me, and with each step he took a wave of love, hit me with increasingly intense waves, deeper and deeper, until when he stopped directly in front of me, I was completely submerged in love, that I never imagined possible love, without conditions, without expectations, without limits. Love that saw my darkness and embraced it, that saw my pain and healed it, that saw my smallness and lifted it up. I would collapse if I had a body to. Collapse instead. My consciousness temporarily dissolved, merging with that love, until I didn't know where I ended, and he began. He held out his hands and I saw the luminous scar marks on his palms, not open wounds bleeding like crucifixes depict, but scars that glowed softly, pulsing with silver light, evidence of sacrifice, of choosing love taken to the absolute extreme. He touched my being. I had no form to touch, but I felt his touch into the essence of who I was, and it was like being rebuilt on a molecular level, on a quantum level. Every trauma, every wound, every emotional scar being transmuted, not erased, because experiences were part of me, but transformed from heaviness to wisdom of pain, in compassion, from suffering into strength. And then he spoke. Voice did not come from mouth. Voice did not travel through air. Voice emanated directly from his center of his heart to mine in frequency that was pure love, condensed into sound. Daniel, my beloved son, my brother, my own fragmented consciousness. You suffered, you carried so much weight. You believed so many lies about yourself. You blamed yourself for things that were never your responsibility. You blamed me for lessons your own soul chose to experience in order to grow, to evolve, to eventually arrive here at this moment of remembrance, encounter, recognition. I couldn't answer. It was beyond words, beyond thoughts. I just absorbed that presence, that truth, that total acceptance. Then he continued, everything Satan told you is true. He didn't lie this time because he wasn't testing. He was teaching. He was revealing layers that religion hid out of control, out of fear, out of misunderstanding. I came to teach that you are gods who forgot your divinity, that the kingdom is not out there. It is here inside that heaven and hell. Are frequent choices that you create moment by moment, that miracles are not exceptions, but applications of universal laws that everyone can access when they raise consciousness, when they clear blockages, when they choose love over fear. Paul, who never met me personally, distorted much of. My message turned empowerment into dependence, turned unconditional love into guilt and control. Council of Nicaea, 300 years after my departure, removed entire gospels, especially those that taught specific techniques, those that showed reincarnation as truth, those that elevated Mary Magdalene to equal, because patriarchy could not accept women as enlightened disciples. So much was lost, so much was hidden, but it doesn't matter because truth always finds its way. Truth always resurfaces, especially now, especially when time is near. Near time, I repeated in thought. He smiled a smile that lit up that entire infinite dimension. Yes, Daniel, my return is near, not as you imagine, not descending from clouds into a physical body, because I never left. I was always here in an adjacent dimension, observing, loving, guiding. But in March of 2030, during the spring equinox, when alignments are perfect, when enough humans have raised the frequency, creating critical mass, I will transmit a massive energetic wave of Christic consciousness that will sweep Earth, and everyone who is ready, everyone who has done internal work, will awaken. Remembering who they really are will be like waking up from cosmic amnesia, and suddenly everything makes sense. And those who are not ready, I asked, finding a mental voice again. Jesus looked with infinite compassion at them. It will be a more difficult period of turbulence because the ancient world will collapse, control systems will fall, lies will be exposed, it will be scary for many, but it is necessary. It is part of the birth process, and even those who resist will eventually come, because this is the natural direction of consciousness, evolution. Some in this life, some in the next, but all will arrive, because all are my brothers, all are sparks of the divine, all are on a journey of return to the source. He paused, and his next sentence hit me. How the hell, Daniel? You were chosen not to be a guru, not to found a religion, not to convert masses. You were chosen to be a witness, to share what you saw, what you felt, without forcing, without preaching. just living the truth, allowing your high frequency to inspire others who are ready. You will plant seeds. Some will sprout immediately. Others will take time, but it is not your responsibility to make it grow. Just plant it. With love and move on, you understand. I understand, I whispered. I understand now. He placed his hand on where my heart would be, and I felt something being installed. I can't describe it differently. It was like downloading a file directly into my consciousness. Compressed knowledge, truths, memories from other lives, memories of who I really was before incarnating in this body called Daniel. And with this download came certainty, an unshakable certainty that surpassed faith because it wasn't believing, it was knowing. Jesus spoke once again. Now listen carefully because this is an instruction that needs to be followed daily, not out of obligation but out of self-love, out of honor for the truth you received each morning. Before anything else, sit in silence, breathe deeply and feel gratitude. Not for things you have, but for things that still come, as if they were already here. Feel the excitement of this future reality. Feel perfect health. Feel abundant love. Feel prosperity. Flowing and decreate, do not ask, do not beg, decreate with absolute certainty because you are the creator of your reality, and decreeing is use your divine power. Secondly, continue. Observe your thoughts without judgment. When low-frequency thought arises, fear, guilt, anger, simply acknowledge, be grateful for the message it brings because every emotion is a messenger, and then consciously choose higher frequency thought. Do this hundreds of times a day at first. Eventually it will become automatic, and your base frequency will rise permanently. Third, forgive yourself, Daniel. You didn't kill Laura. You couldn't have saved her. She completed her mission. Her time expired as planned before incarnating, and she is fine. She is here with me, sometimes watching you, wishing you free yourself from guilt. So free yourself. Forgive yourself for all real or imagined mistakes, because without forgiveness you remain in frequent prison. Without forgiveness, there is no freedom. And fourth, most important ending, love yourself unconditionally. First, then others, then everything that exists. Love is the highest frequency. Love is the answer to absolutely everything. Love heals. Love manifests. Love transforms love. It is God in action, so love, Daniel, simply love, and everything else will flow naturally. Tears of gratitude flooded my being. I will live this. I promised I will honor what you showed me. I will be a silent witness. I will raise my frequency and help others who are ready. I promise. He smiled again, that smile of infinite love. I know you will, because your soul chose this before you were born. This meeting was already planned. Your suffering was the necessary catalyst to break ego, to open heart. Now you are ready now. Begin truly and always remember, Daniel, you and I are one, not separate. We have never been, just as you and the Father are one, just as you and every human being are one. On the level, deeper. Separation has always been greater. Illusion created to enable experience of duality. But illusion is falling apart. Veil is tearing humanity, is remembering, and you are part of this wave of remembering. He began to move away, gradually dissolving into golden light. I will always be here within your heart, always accessible, always present. Just call. And I will respond not as an external entity, but as my own elevated consciousness, speaking through intuition, through synchronicities, through peace that surpasses understanding. Go now, live, fully love, completely be light, and last words, before disappearing completely. I love you, my brother. I love you infinitely. And then he was gone, and I was alone in that space of light, feeling emptiness and fullness, simultaneously empty of his physical presence, but full of his love that had been installed permanently in my being. Then that space too began to fade, golden light becoming less intense, less vivid, physical reality beginning to bleed at the edges of perception, and with a sudden jerk, I came back. I opened my eyes. I was back in the car, hands still clinging to the steering wheel, body drenched in sweat, despite the cold shivering violently. Not from the cold, but from energetic overload. The sun had completely risen while I was outside. The fog had disappeared, and Satan was no longer there. I looked around, frantically looking for him, but the open field was empty. Just my car alone on red dirt under a blue sky, perfectly normal, perfectly mundane, as if nothing extraordinary had happened, but I knew it had happened. Every cell in my body vibrated differently. Every thought was clearer. Every breathing was deeper. I was different, fundamentally, irreversibly different. I looked at the clock on the car dashboard. It said 9 hours and 17 minutes in the morning. It had only been 1 hour and 34 minutes since I stopped there, but it seemed like eternities. It felt like entire lives compressed into minutes. I tried to start the car, hands shaking so much that it took me 3 tries. Finally, the engine started, and I drove back to the city on autopilot, mind still processing, trying to categorize, trying to rationalize the irrational. I got home at 10 o'clock. In 40 minutes, I staggered straight into the room. I fell on the bed still with my clothes on and passed out. Not normal sleep, but total unconsciousness, as if the system needed to restart after overload. I woke up 16 hours later. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. The next day, sore body as if I had run a marathon, cloudy mind, confused for a few seconds. I thought it had been a dream, nightmare, hallucination, but then memories came back with full force, and I knew it hadn't been a dream. It had been more real than anything else in my mind life. In the following days, I couldn't function. Normally, I called work. I made up an excuse about the flu. I needed time to process, to integrate, so I didn't go completely crazy. I spent hours sitting in silence, just feeling the reverberations of that encounter, just trying to accept that it had really happened, that I had really seen Satan, I had really met Jesus, I had really received a mission that I didn't ask for, but I couldn't refuse. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those deep brown eyes of Jesus. I saw that unconditional love. I heard that voice resonating in my chest. I love you, my brother. I love you infinitely. And I woke up crying, not from sadness, but from a deep, visceral longing for something I touched briefly and now seemed too distant. I started to cry spontaneously in the middle of simple tasks. Making coffee, tears came out of nowhere. Driving to the market, I had to pull over because my vision was blurred. Sitting alone at night, watching television without really watching, I started sobbing for no apparent reason, or perhaps with a deeper reason that superficial consciousness could understand. It was as if the body was releasing decades of pain, at once transmuting all the accumulated suffering into salty liquid catharsis. I couldn't talk to anyone about it. I tried once. I casually mentioned to a neighbor that I was going through an intense spiritual experience, and he looked at me with concern. He suggested that I see a psychiatrist, that maybe depression was making me hallucinate, and I immediately realized that I couldn't share this. I couldn't throw pearls before swine, as Jesus said, not out of superiority but out of protection, because this truth was too precious to be ridiculed by those who weren't ready to receive it. The weight was overwhelming, weight of knowledge that I couldn't share, weight of mission that I didn't know how to accomplish, weight of having seen what I saw, of knowing what I know, of carrying absolute certainty in a world of doubt, weight of looking at people around me, sleeping in their automatic lives, and knowing that awakening is coming, but not being able to force them to wake up before their time. I had moments of questioning my sanity. I sat on the edge of the bed at 4 in the morning with my hands on my head thinking, had I gone crazy? Was everything delusional? Should I be hospitalized? But then I felt that presence, that heat in my chest, that certainty that couldn't be denied, couldn't be rationalized, couldn't be explained, but it was more real than anything that 5 physical senses could perceive. And I knew I hadn't gone crazy. I knew I had been chosen. I knew I now carried deep responsibility. 3 weeks after the meeting, I forced myself to start the practices that Jesus had taught. I woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning before the sun rose. I sat in silence in the empty room. I closed my eyes. I took 3 deep breaths and tried to feel gratitude. But at first, I felt nothing, just empty, just mechanical, just forced attempt. Then I remembered the touch of Jesus. I remembered that unconditional love, and something opened in my chest, small opening. But enough, and gratitude began to flow, not for big things, but simply for being alive, for having breath in my lungs, for having a heart beating, for being chosen for that incredible experience. I practiced 5 minutes that first day. On the second day, I got 7, on the third 10, and gradually the gratitude became easier, more natural, more genuine, and I started to notice subtle changes. I slept a little better. I woke up a little more rested. The constant pain in my chest that I had been carrying since Laura's death began to slowly diminish, as if it was being dissolved from the inside out, cell by cell. In the second practice of observing thoughts, I realized how toxic my mind had become after death. How many thoughts of guilt, of self-hatred, of hopelessness were constantly circulating in a vicious loop, creating and recreating my personal hell. So I began to consciously interrupt these patterns every time a negative thought arose. I paused, breathed, and chose to replace it with something better. Not necessarily positive at first, just neutral, just less destructive. And surprisingly, it worked, not perfectly, not always, but more often than not it failed. And my base frequency began to rise. Forgiving myself was more difficult. I carried such deep guilt for not having saved Laura, for not having been in the car with her that night, for having let her drive alone for so many small moments that I ruminated obsessively, thinking, if I had done it differently, if I had insisted, if I had, but Jesus' instructions echoed you. He didn't kill Laura. She completed her mission, so I started the ritual every night before going to sleep. I looked at the photo of her on the bedside table and said out loud, I forgive you for leaving, and I forgive myself for not being able to save you. I repeated it until the tears dried up, until I felt lightness, until I felt like maybe, just maybe, I could eventually believe this. And loving began with small acts, looking at my reflection in the mirror, and instead of seeing failure, see a wounded human being trying to heal. Speaking gently to myself, the way I would speak to a frightened child, caring for my body that I had neglected, eating better, sleeping better, walking outdoors. And gradually, very gradually, self-love began to blossom. Not egoic love, but compassionate love. Recognition of my own humanity from my own wounds. And I began to feel that maybe, just maybe, I deserved to be happy again. And then synchronicities began 3 days after starting practices consistently. I received an unexpected call from a cousin who hadn't spoken in 5 years, saying he thought of me out of the blue and wanted to know how I was. We talked for 2 hours. He mentioned a book about spirituality that had changed his life. Title was exactly what I needed to hear. I wrote it down. I bought it. I read it. I devoured it and found scientific validation of everything I had. Experienced quantum physics, vibrational frequencies, morphogenetic field. Everything was there in scientific language, confirming truths that Jesus had revealed. 5 days later, a chance meeting in a bakery with an old co-worker who became a holistic therapist. We started talking casually. She mentioned the energy cleansing technique she practiced. She offered a free session. I accepted, and during the session she commented without knowing anything about it, "You went through something profound recently. I can see a change in your energy. Something transformed you. I don't know what, but you're not the same person I met." I didn't share any details. I just confirmed that yes, something had changed, and she smiled and said, "Stay on the path. You're exactly where you need to be." A week later, a financial opportunity came out of nowhere. An old patient I had taken care of years ago. He found me, and he offered me a job as a private nurse for his elderly mother. The payment was 3 times what I earned at the hospital. Flexible hours, a better environment. I accepted immediately, and for the first time in more than a year, the financial situation, which was chaotic, began to stabilize. Money began to flow, not extravagant abundance, but comfortable sufficiency. And I realized that the more I practiced high frequency, the more the universe responded, the more doors opened, the more synchronicities happened, as if reality was conspiring in my favor. My health improved. Drastically high blood pressure that I had developed, normalized without medication. Back pain that tormented me, disappeared. Energy that had been at a minimum level for months, suddenly multiplied. I woke up excited, curious about what day would bring. I was becoming different, not just emotionally, but physically, as if every cell was being recalibrated at a new frequency. Relationships changed, toxic people who drained. My energy simply stopped reaching out to me without confrontation, without drama. They just naturally moved away, and new people started to appear, people who vibrated at similar frequencies. People who were also on journeys of awakening, people with whom I could have real deep conversations without fear of judgment. The first student appeared 4 months after my meeting. I was in the park, walking, meditating, appreciating nature, when I saw a man sitting alone on a bench, head in hands, shoulders hunched over. His energy was very heavy, dense, opaque gray. I could literally see his energy field, and I immediately recognized my own self from months ago, broken without hope on the edge of the abyss. I gently approached and sat on the other side of the bench, respecting his space. We were silent for a few minutes. Then he spoke without looking at me. "I'm thinking about ending it all." His voice was a hollow, dead echo of my own voice. "That early morning in March," I replied softly, "I know what it's like. I've been where you are, and I survived. I came, and there's a reason why you didn't yet. There's a reason why we're here now, on this bench at this exact moment." He finally looked at me, swollen red eyes, face marked by suffering. "Who are you? Why do you care? Everyone gave up on me. I didn't give up." I responded, "Because someone didn't give up on me when I needed it most. Because I learned something that changed everything, and if you are willing to listen without judgment with an open heart, I can share." We talked for 2 hours sitting on that bench as the sun set. I didn't tell him about Satan or Jesus. It wasn't time yet, but I shared principles about frequencies, about inner heaven and hell, about the power of conscious choice, about how suffering can be a portal to transformation. He listened, he absorbed, he asked questions, and I saw light starting to return in his eyes, slowly, gradually. In the end, he thanked me with tears flowing freely. "I don't know why I trusted you. I don't know why I told you everything. But I feel that our meeting was not a coincidence. It was not agreed. There are no coincidences, just synchronicities. You are being awakened just like I was. And if you want, I can guide you not as a guru, but as a brother who walked through the valley before you." We exchanged contacts. We maintained connections. He started the practices. He began to transform his life. And 3 months later, he introduced me to someone else who needed help. And so a small network began to form organically, naturally, without proselytizing, without formal organization, just souls recognizing souls, just light sharing light, just love multiplying. And to this day, as I speak these words 3 years and almost 9 months after that impossible encounter, I am still deeply affected. I have not completely overcome it. I still wake up at 3 in the morning often, not because of insomnia, but because of activation by downloads of information by the presence of Jesus that I can feel as clearly as I feel my own heart beating. I still cry. Emotion comes in waves without warning, especially when I remember those deep brown eyes, that unconditional love that no human words can adequately describe. Tears come not from sadness, but from overwhelming gratitude of having been chosen, of having seen, of having known. I live consciously now, not perfectly, because I am human and I have difficult days. I have moments of doubt. I have relapses into old patterns. But the difference is that now I have tools, I have knowledge, I have practices that bring me back to the high frequency. I have unshakable certainty that anchors me when storms come. The small community has grown. We are now 17 people. We meet informally once a month, we share experiences, we practice together, we raise frequency collectively, and everyone is planting seeds in their own spheres of influence. Everyone is being a silent light wherever they go, and the network continues to expand. I feel with increasing certainty that the date approaching March 2030 is just a little over 4 years away, and signs are everywhere. More people awakening, more interest in spirituality, more questioning of authorities, more exposure of lies. Old systems beginning to crack under their own weight. Preparation is happening, just as Jesus said, just as Satan revealed. I prepare not with fear but with expectation by not only practicing high frequency but also preparing to serve when critical mass awakens, when planetary transformation accelerates, when those who resist need anchors of light to hold on and not be swept away by chaos. I have deep peace now, not peace from the absence of problems, but peace that comes from knowing, from being absolutely sure, of having seen with eyes that transcended physical, of having felt with a heart that touched divine, and this peace no one can take away. No circumstance can shake it, because it is anchored in direct experience, not in blind faith, but in visceral knowledge. And now I need to speak directly to you who made it this far, who heard this complete story, who took the time to absorb every word, every revelation, every uncomfortable truth. You are here, now reading or hearing this. Not by chance. Algorithm did not bring you here alone. Your soul guided you to this message at this exact moment because you are ready to awaken, because you always knew there was something more, always felt that official teachings were incomplete, always intuited greater truth hidden beneath layers of dogma and control. If you always doubted organized religions, you were right. Intuition was correct, because religion as it was constructed is a tool of control, not liberation. If you always felt that God could not be a judgmental tyrant, condemning children to eternal hell for temporal mistakes, you were right, because God is or unconditional, not punitive judge. If you always believe that we are more than just a body, that consciousness continues after death, that we have the power to create our reality, you were right. These intuitions were memories of forgotten truths, whispers of the soul trying to wake you up. This story of Daniel, of Satan, of Jesus, of revelations, of mission dates is not just history. It is invitation. It is a call. It is activation for those who are ready. You feel a shiver running through your body. You feel something resonating deep within your chest. You feel this is true, even if the rational mind resists. This is your soul recognizing this is your higher self, confirming this is the inner Christ, beginning to awaken. So if this story touched something deep inside you, if you felt at some point that you were hearing exactly what you needed to hear, if you recognize truth in these words, even if you can't rationally explain why, then leave a like now. Because this simple gesture is not just about algorithm. It's about you declaring to the universe, I am ready. I recognize this truth. I choose to awaken. And when hundreds of thousands of people leave a like on a message of truth, the morphogenetic field changes. It makes it easier for the next person to awaken you. Understand you make a difference, your choice matters. And if you want to continue receiving awakening stories that reveal hidden truths that could be the exact key you need for your own transformation, then subscribe to this channel now and turn on the notification bell. Because every story we share here has the potential to change life. Maybe yours, maybe the next story will be the one that finally breaks the last barrier, that releases the last block, that completely activates your inner Christ. You don't want to miss this. Leave in the comments, have you ever had inexplicable experiences, encounters with beings that you cannot categorize, moments of absolute clarity where you know something without knowing how you feel? What date of planetary transformation is approaching? Are you ready to awaken your Christ consciousness? Share your location, your city, your country. Because when we see how many souls around the globe are resonating with the same truth, we realize that we are not alone, that the movement is global, that the network of light is real and is growing exponentially. You are not here by chance. You have never been every experience in your life, every pain, every joy, every encounter, every loss. Everything was preparing you for this moment of awakening to the mission that your soul chose before incarnating for the role that only you can play in the transformation that is coming. You are necessary. You are important. You make a difference. Carry this truth with responsibility, not with ego, not with superiority, but with humility, with compassion, knowing that each person is in their own timing, on their own journey, and their role is not to convert it, is not to preach it, is simply to be a silent light, to be a loving presence, to be a high frequency that inspires others who are ready to seek their own truth, their own connection, their own inner Christ. Live in a high frequency, not because you have to or should, but because you now know that this is the only way to create inner heaven, that this is the only way to manifest the life you want, that this is the only way to serve collective transformation, live in gratitude, in love, in certainty, and watch miracles begin to flow in your life, just as they flowed in Daniel's life, as they will flow in the life of anyone who consciously chooses to elevate. Always remember, you and Jesus are one, not separate. Never were you. And God are one, not creature separate from Creator, but divine extension experiencing itself. You and every human being are one at the deepest level. Separation has always been greater illusion created to enable experience of individuality, but illusion is dissolving. Veil is tearing humanity, is remembering, and you are an essential part of this wave of remembrance. The return of Jesus is not Him coming down from the clouds to save you. It is you awakening to divinity that has always been dormant within it. Is you remembering who you really are. It is you activating Christ within. And when enough do this, when critical mass is reached, entire planet will transform from fear frequency to love frequency, from separation consciousness to unity consciousness, from scarcity paradigm to abundance paradigm. This is the return of Jesus. This is second coming. This is what is coming in March 2030, and you can choose be ready. You can choose to be one of the anchors. You can choose to be part of the solution. Start now. Start with next choice you make, next thought you think, next emotion you choose to feel. And that's all I have to share today. Every truth that was revealed to me, every experience that transformed me, every mission I received. Now I pass it on to you like a torch being passed from corridor to corridor until and call with truth. Enlighten the whole world. Receive with an open heart, practice with dedication, share with wisdom, and above all, love. Love yourself unconditionally, others, to everything that exists, because love is the answer. Love has always been the answer. Love will always be the answer. And until the next story, until the next awakening, until the next truth being revealed, remember you are loved, you are divine, you are powerful beyond measure. and return has already begun. It has started in you.